Sup, you beautiful bastards! Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show, your daily dive into the news. And today, we've got about 7 things we need to talk about, starting with this. Trump just threatened to send now multiple branches of the military to U.S. cities against their will. Because yesterday, Trump delivered an hour-long rambling speech before U.S. troops in Japan, during which he spent a lot of time bragging about his achievements. And at one point, he was discussing all the cities that he thinks are crime-ridden and how his deployment of the National Guard in those places has made them perfect crime-free utopias, with him then going on to say,
people don't care if we send in our military, if we send in our National Guard, if we send in Space Command. They don't care who the hell it is. They just want to be safe. We have cities that are troubled. We can't have cities that are troubled. And we're sending in our National Guard. And if we need more than the National Guard, we'll send more than the National Guard, because we're going to have safe cities. We're not going to have people killed in our cities. And whether people like that or not, that's what we're doing.
Now with that, Trump did not elaborate, but when questioned about his comments during a press gaggle on Air Force One today, we saw this.
What did you mean last night when you said you were prepared to send more than the National Guard into American cities?
Sure, I would do that if it was necessary. You know, if it was necessary to do that, but it hasn't been necessary. We're doing a great job without that. It was necessary. As you know, I'm allowed to do that.
Do you need other branches of the military you would send in, or?
Who are you with?
The New York Times.
That's very good. Very good. Well, if you write it correctly, I'll give you the answer. But, you know, I want to enact a certain act. I'm allowed to do it routinely, and whether about 50% of presidents have used that, as you know, and I'd be allowed to do whatever I want. But we haven't chosen to do that because we're doing very well without it. But I'd be allowed to do that, you understand? And the courts wouldn't get involved, nobody would get involved, and I could send the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, I could send anybody I wanted.
I'm sorry I let him talk to you unattended for so long. So, a few things to break down. So first of all, the act that he's referencing appears to be the Insurrection Act, right? It's that centuries-old statute that allows the president to deploy active duty troops for civil policing purposes when there is a rebellion or widespread public unrest. And specifically, the act allows the president to send in those troops when a state government requests it, or if the president declares that the unrest is obstructing the enforcement of federal law. And if you watch the show or you've paid attention to the news, you're familiar at this point. Trump has floated this idea over and over again. But, very key thing, he is wrong or lying or was lied to and is just regurgitating that this is something that's been routinely used by about 50% of presidents. In all of our history, it's been used by just 17 presidents, so you're talking about 37%, but also, the act has only been invoked 30 times, so it's not common, especially in modern times. In fact, it's only been used 3 times in the last half a century. And the last time it was used at all was more than 30 years ago during the Rodney King riots. So if Trump did decide to pull the trigger, it would be absolutely massive, especially because countless legal experts and leaders in the cities that Trump has targeted all agree that there is nothing actually going down right now that's even close to the level of public unrest that is historically used to justify invoking the act. But for now, we're gonna have to see what Trump does, right? Does he follow through on this threat, or is he just saying stuff because he wants to intimidate and threaten? But then next up today, if you're active on social media, there's a good chance that you've seen one of these kind of slick video montages routinely put out by the Trump administration.
In Washington, as left-wing politicians choose to sit back in their posh, taxpayer-funded offices, our officers are on the ground, often without pay, working hand in hand with the American people to throw back an invasion force of criminal illegals, Antifa terrorists, anarchists, and thugs.
But here's the thing. It turns out that many of these videos are not just clearly propaganda, they're also what Trump would call
fake news.
And you've had groups like the Washington Post using reverse image searches, geolocation tools, and other techniques to track down the original sources. Right? And it found that just over the past few months, at least 6 videos have claimed to show one thing while actually showing a completely different and unrelated thing. So for example, in this video that DHS posted back in August celebrating its takeover of DC.
Now that the border is secure, the battle for the soul of our nation turns inward, as federal agents work day and night to arrest, detain, and deport vicious criminals from our nation's capital.
It turns out that several of those clips are actually from Los Angeles, West Palm Beach, Nantucket Island, and Martha's Vineyard. And in fact, they appear to have pulled footage straight from the Nantucket Current, a local news outlet, without giving any credit. And that's also definitely not the only time that DHS has been caught stealing journalists' work. Where you also had this video supposedly from Portland.
In Portland, Oregon, as Antifa terrorists have surged against our federal facilities, our officers have survived their attacks and worked swiftly to round up and arrest these violent criminals.
But when freelancer Ford Fisher saw that, he quickly identified it as his own footage, and it was actually filmed days earlier, not in Portland, Oregon, but in Broadview, Illinois, with DHS apparently even cropping his watermark out of the video before publishing it. And then footage from that same protest in Illinois was also used to show that Memphis had apparently been, quote, abandoned to crime and lawlessness, and that residents had been resounding in their thankfulness when DHS arrived. Also in another video, there's footage of smuggling boats and migrants crossing the border at night being used to show how past presidents had let illegal immigrants into the country. But as you had the Post pointing out, some of those clips are actually from Donald Trump's first term. Now with all this, there are gonna be people that go, okay, well the fake or misleading posts, are they really that important? Right? Who's really looking at these or watching this anyway? But like, if you look at their engagement, some of these reach bigger audiences than even mainstream news reports, which is also notable because they're often shot in a format similar to a newscast. Right? And the DHS frequently debunks the mainstream media, claiming to provide the facts.
These pathetic journalists clearly don't understand the reality of protecting the American people at all hours, day or night.
And so a meaningful number of people, they probably watch these as an alternative to real news. And so all of a sudden, we're talking some 1.5 million views on just this video, for example, which claims to show Chicago in absolute chaos. Though you can tell much of it's actually from Florida, since for one thing, as the Daily Beast pointed out, palm trees don't typically grow in Chicago. And actually the AFP news agency traced other clips to Arizona, California, Nebraska, South Carolina, and Texas, some of them from Biden's term. Now with all this, when the Post asked for comment from DHS spokeswoman Tricia McLaughlin, she countered that the videos in question were a small percentage of the more than 400 posted this year. But you've got critics saying that regardless of the number count, that the whole practice of crafting these high-res movies is itself obscene, whether the clips are accurate or not, though there is a big concern when they're not. Though connected to the obscene comment, you have people pointing to things like, ICE agents, whether they're raiding an apartment complex or yanking someone out of a car, they've got in-house photographers and videographers following right behind like it's a reality TV show. I mean, they even added a $28,000 drone to their aerial recording fleet recently. So for these unlucky migrants, like the worst day of their life, it gets turned into this epic action montage that millions of people apparently watch for entertainment. Or alternatively, there's a tone-deaf meme where the brutal reality of someone's door getting blown open is paired with the surrealism of the Pokemon soundtrack. And so with that, you've got Eddie Perez, a former director for civic integrity at Twitter, telling the Post, "What we are witnessing is the collapse of government accountability through communication based on facts. They're not trying to communicate actions and outcomes. They're acting like filmmakers trying to make people laugh, to make them feel scared, to inspire certain emotions regardless of the truth." Right? And the White House also doesn't seem to be denying this accusation. I mean, you had a spokeswoman saying, quote, and again, this is from a government official, "The Trump administration will continue to highlight the many successes of the president's agenda through engaging content and banger memes on social media." Right? And keep in mind, all of this is in addition to what the DHS is doing on its official website and their news and updates feeds that have just kind of become a spigot for blatantly partisan propaganda. I understand they've done so much of this, it's become normalized, but it is important to remember, this is supposed to be a nonpartisan professional law enforcement agency. While it doesn't shock, it almost doesn't even register, it is important to remember, all of this is batshit crazy. But yeah, now we're at a point where it feels like more of the same, because career professionals across government, they've been silenced or purged and replaced with the president's loyalists. And then we've got more news that we're gonna talk about in just a minute, but first let me say, my brain, it doesn't have an off switch. It just trades one chaos tab for another, right? Even when the day is done, it's still just running background apps labeled worry, overthink, and should have emailed those guys back. And that's why I've been using today's sponsor, Brain.fm, not just to focus during the day, but to actually chill out at night. Right, at first, I tried it for work. I couldn't focus for more than 10 minutes without falling into an internet hole. But Brain.fm, it's not just playlists or ambient noise. It's sound engineered with neuroscience to sync with your brain and help you focus, relax, or sleep better. And they've got modes like deep work, creative, and motivation, and even one for ADHD brains. And yeah, it actually helps. Brain.fm even won a National Science Foundation grant, and a study in Nature showed their music boosts attention and performance, especially for people with ADHD. And now I use it to focus during the day and switch to their sleep and relaxation modes at night, because if you can't quiet your brain, you never really recharge. So hey, try it free for 30 days at brain.fm/DeFranco or scan that QR code. That's brain.fm/DeFranco for music that helps your brain work when it should and rest when it needs to. But then next up in the news today, Drake and streamer Adin Ross are promoting and profiting off of illegal gambling. But that is what this new lawsuit's alleging, with a guy in Missouri filing a class action complaint against both Drake and Adin, as well as the company that owns the online social casino, Stake.us. And as you may have seen, Drake and Adin, they've frequently promoted Stake online, either on streams or on social media posts. In fact, just this week, you had Drake posting a video where he runs through his house to check a $1 million Bitcoin balance on his Stake account. Well, there have long been controversies around gambling streams and people promoting these kinds of things to their audiences. Now you have this lawsuit accusing Drake, Adin, and Stake specifically of, quote, deceptive, fraudulent, and unfair practices, alleging that they've actively misled consumers by promoting Stake.us as a harmless social casino when it's actually highly highly addictive and unlawful, noting that in many states throughout the US, including Missouri, online gambling is either banned or heavily regulated, but it claims that, quote, to evade these restrictions, Sweepstakes Limited created Stake.us, which conducts online casino gambling in open violation of Missouri state gaming and consumer protection laws. Right, claiming that it's a virtual clone of the global casino Stake.com, and it's kind of just rebranded to trick online users. And you've got the lawsuit saying that Stake really starts crossing legal lines via its dual currency system, explaining to hide the true nature of its online gambling operation, Stake asserts that the only chips it sells to consumers are tokens called gold coins, which can only be used for casual gameplay on the Stake.us platform, have no real-world value, and can never be cashed out. However, Stake bundles every purchase of gold coins with a second type of token called Stake Cash as a supposedly free bonus. Unlike gold coins, Stake Cash can be wagered on casino games and cashed out for real money. The suit claims that by offering Stake Cash, it's operating an unlicensed and illegal online casino. With the suit then pointing to the influencers that Stake uses to promote, saying that this messaging includes slick ads and flashy visuals, making its game seem safe, fun, and harmless, but then saying in reality, Stake creates exactly the kind of dangerous environment that Missouri gaming laws exist to stop. Right, and that's where Drake and Adin come in, because the suit alleges that they promote Stake under deeply fraudulent pretenses because they don't gamble on Stake with their own money, even though they tell the public otherwise. With it even going as far as to call Drake the unofficial mascot of Stake and accusing him of glamorizing the platform to millions of impressionable fans, many of whom treat his wild betting habits like gospel, saying the defendants have been unjustly enriched at the expense of those involved in this class action. And with that, it's seeking to recover gambling losses and to prevent Stake from any further violations. And with all this, as far as reactions, you had Adin Ross responding on stream, dismissing the claims of the lawsuit.
I will tell you guys this. Read through the case yourself. It's bullshit.
For now, we're gonna have to wait to see how this plays out, though I will say, right, this is not the only kind of thing that we've seen in the space. Right, earlier this month, you had California Governor Gavin Newsom signing a law cracking down on dual currency models and other potentially deceptive strategies that can be used on online platforms to simulate gambling. And also, back in August, the Los Angeles city attorney sued Stake, calling it a rogue and real money gambling racket with destructive repercussions for its players. So definitely just a lot of moving pieces right now. But then, next up right now, Jamaica's fucked right now. If we're just that's the headline. Flooding, power outages, no cell service. That's just some of what Jamaicans are dealing with after facing Hurricane Melissa yesterday. Right, it's the strongest storm in the island's history, and in fact, things got so bad that Prime Minister Andrew Holness declared the entire country a disaster area. Though also, other lawmakers have said that areas in the west and central Jamaica are far worse off. Right, and that's because the west is where the bulk of the storm and its eye wall made landfall, leading to the area being completely ravaged amid the extremely high winds. Which, quick tangent there, some Mad Men researchers also flew into the eye of this Category 5 storm, which is extremely rare and dangerous to get this crazy footage that kind of just adds to the story of what happened here. I mean, you had Holness describing St. Elizabeth's Parish as being underwater, right? And all of this is the authorities are still trying to get an idea of just how bad the damage actually is, but what we do know is that the winds reached speeds of 180 miles per hour, meaning that anything that wasn't like a concrete building's just gone. Even structures that had withstood major storms for hundreds of years, they couldn't take on Melissa. I'm talking about structures like the 300-year-old Anglican church in Black River. Of course, the biggest impact is to the actual people there, right? And hundreds of thousands of children are expected to face struggles with flood, housing, and school as part of the storm's aftermath. All while 3/4 of the island doesn't have electricity right now. But I will say that the good news, or it could have been way worse news, is that right now the death toll seems relatively low at just 7. But I also have to add an asterisk to that because no official numbers have actually yet come out. Now, all that said, as far as Hurricane Melissa, after hitting Jamaica, it went from a Category 5 to a 3. And yes, while that is a big difference, it's still extremely dangerous, and now you just have to look at Cuba to see that. The southern part of the island got hit by Hurricane Melissa, which led to hundreds of thousands getting displaced. Even major cities like Santiago de Cuba were facing major flooding and damaged buildings, although as of recording, there have been no deaths attributed to the storm in Cuba. Right, and then as far as what's next, that's likely going to be the Bahamas, which is expected to face a Category 2 Melissa later this afternoon and evening. And again, like everywhere else, you have officials warning that lives could be lost, especially amid 25 inches of rainfall and 4 to 7 feet of storm surge. So obviously, this is something that we're going to have to keep our eyes on. But then next up from that today, we've got to talk about how Israeli airstrikes just killed at least 104 Palestinians in Gaza, including at least 46 children, according to Gaza's health ministry. With a spokesperson for Gaza's civil defense claiming the Israeli strikes targeted tents for displaced people, homes, and the vicinity of a hospital in the Strip. And with that, describing the situation in the territory as catastrophic and terrifying, and calling the strikes a clear and flagrant violation of the ceasefire agreement. But even before last night, you had Gaza's media office accusing Israel of committing 80 violations since the ceasefire began, killing 97 Palestinians and injuring 230. And that is, Israel has also repeatedly accused Hamas of violating the ceasefire as well, including in response to its failure to return the remains of all the deceased as is required by the ceasefire agreement. So far, the group only returning the remains of 15 hostages and claiming that they don't know the exact location of all of the bodies remaining in the territory. And with that, claiming that it's lost contact with several of its units that have been holding the captives and were then killed in Israeli attacks. And with that, earlier in the week, you had the group handing over body parts that Israel said were actually partial remains of a hostage recovered earlier in the war. And you had Israeli PM Bibi Netanyahu describing this as a clear violation of the ceasefire agreement. And with that, you had the Israeli military also publishing footage of what it said were Hamas members reburying remains in order to stage a false discovery, accusing the group of attempting to create a false impression of efforts to locate the bodies. And adding to that, a firefight between Palestinian militants and Israeli troops in Rafah resulted in the death of an Israeli soldier who also reportedly held American citizenship. And while Hamas denied any involvement in the shooting, you had Israel accusing the group of being behind it and Netanyahu ordering the IDF to carry out, quote, forceful strikes on Gaza. And with that, you had Israel's foreign ministry spokesperson claiming the high death toll on Hamas using civilians as human shields. And as far as the U.S., claiming that the Trump administration had been informed about the strikes and that they had been carried out in full coordination with the U.S. And with that, you did have Trump defending Israel's actions, saying that the country should hit back when its troops come under attack, all the while also insisting that the ceasefire is holding.
Nothing's going to jeopardize. You have to understand, Hamas is a very small part of peace in the Middle East, and they have to behave. They're on the rough side, but they said they would be good, and if they're good, they're going to be happy, and if they're not good, they're going to be terminated. Their lives will be terminated.
And with that, at least for now, you have Israel also claiming that the ceasefire is back in effect. And then we'll get right back to the news in a minute. But first, let me say, traveling abroad, it's awesome until your phone carrier hits you with welcome to Paris. That'll be $10 a day for slow internet. Right? And those international plans, total scam, 2 gigs a day. And then you're crawling on 3G, wondering if Google Maps froze or if you're just lost. And that's why today's sponsor, Saily, it's the move. Saily is a new eSIM that gives you affordable, high-speed data in over 200 countries, no kiosks, no paperclip SIM swaps, no begging for Wi-Fi. Book your Uber, message your partner, or post that I made it selfie right off the plane. And also, if you're country hopping across Europe, your plan keeps working seamlessly. No switching cards or juggling carriers. It even has a built-in ad blocker to save data and block sketchy pop-ups, plus 24/7 support if anything goes sideways. And Saily works on all dual SIM phones, and if your device isn't compatible, they'll refund you. So skip the airport SIM hustle and stay connected like a pro. Get an exclusive 15% discount on Saily eSIM data plans. Just scan that QR code on screen or go to saily.com/Phil and download the app and use code Phil at checkout. That's saily.com/Phil. Stay connected and sail through your next trip. But then, next up today, you've got mass killings and atrocities just underway in the Sudanese city of El Fasher. And this situation may be only about to get worse, which is also saying a lot, because even before this week, things were just so bad. Right? Because Sudan, it's a country that's been engulfed in a civil war since April of 2023. As many as 400,000 people have been killed by some estimates, more than 14 million people have been displaced, and some 25 million people have faced extreme hunger. And in all this, you have both sides, the Sudanese army and the paramilitary force known as the RSF, both being accused of widespread atrocities. Right, with the United States even accusing the RSF of genocide back in January. Though I will say maybe that's not the most surprising thing, because the RSF actually grew out of the Janjaweed militias that were accused of genocide in the region of Darfur over 2 decades ago. Right, and of course, they're also the group that for a year and a half has held the city of El Fasher under siege. And throughout that time, you've had experts, activists, and humanitarian organizations warning that the fall of this city, it could be a catastrophe. Right, with many pointing to what happened back in 2023 in El Geneina, another city in the region of Darfur as an example. But there, the RSF slaughtered as many as 15,000 civilians in ethnically motivated killings after taking control. Right, and then in the case of El Fasher, as this siege has dragged on, the roughly 260,000 civilians who remained, half of them being children, were trapped without aid, with many having no choice but to try to survive on animal fodder, right? Food that they're giving to livestock. But then you had big news on Sunday with the RSF announcing that it had taken control of the army's main base in the city. And you had the Sudanese army chief acknowledging the loss of the city and saying that his forces had withdrawn to a safer location. While another 26,000 people managed to flee the city as well, approximately 177,000 civilians are still trapped as the RSF has constructed a 35-mile barrier further sealing off food, medicine, and escape routes. All while we've seen reports that the group's been shooting civilians who are trying to flee. Or with Shayna Lewis, for example, a Sudan specialist for the organization Preventing and Ending Mass Atrocities, saying residents who previously left the city are finding out about the death of their loved ones through footage of executions that are widely circulating on social media. Right, and with that, there are accusations that they've executed more than 2,000 unarmed civilians in recent days. And you've got Yale University's Humanitarian Research Lab, which has been monitoring this war using open source intelligence and satellite imagery, saying that The evidence is consistent with accusations of mass killings by the RSF. Writing in a new report, the city appears to be in a systemic and intentional process of ethnic cleansing of indigenous non-Arab communities through forced displacement and summary execution. With then the lab's executive director, Nathaniel Raymond, adding, "We are only at the beginning of a wave of violence. I have never seen a level of violence against an area like we are seeing now." Saying the only thing that even came close were the first 24 hours of the Rwandan genocide. And so also with that, it's worth noting that foreign powers are fueling this bloodshed, right? Turkey, Russia, and Iran, for example, they've supplied or sold weapons to the army. Also, the United Arab Emirates, they've provided drones, artillery, and other weapons to the RSF, right? And then with that, you've had the US getting called out for its close relationship with the UAE. For example, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy writing on X in a response to the events, "Why is the US allowing the UAE, which we fund militarily, help the brutal RSF engage in mass atrocity?" And then adding, "FYI, this isn't just about Trump. The Biden admin was letting this happen too." And so we'll have to wait to see if anything comes from that. But what I will say is we are seeing a potential major turning point in this war. Right? El Fasher was the last remaining major city in Darfur controlled by the army. And now with the RSF in control, you've got the army excluded from a whole 1/3 of Sudanese territory, which is a development that experts say raises the possibility that the country could face partition. Then, finally today, let's end with one more thing and a congratulations. Starting with a congrats to Sarah G, SeatGeek's latest weekly winner who just scored $500 in tickets and has taken her daughter to either Rend Collective or Pentatonics. And for the rest of y'all, that's right. SeatGeek is still giving away $500 in tickets, and you should definitely enter today if you haven't already. I mean, you could be the next winner and snag $500 towards seeing your favorite artist, sporting event, or play. I mean, there's like over 70,000 events to choose from. And all you gotta do is just add code DeFranco to your SeatGeek app profile for a chance at the weekly $500 prize. No purchase necessary. But then, as far as the final thing today, it's actually a bit from my new podcast that just came out today, Crashing Out with myself and Alex Perlman. And of course, you can watch or listen to the full hour plus. I got links to the YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify in the description. But for the here and now, I wanted to share where we were talking about term limits and age limits and more politicians just needing to step down. Because we were talking about it for a number of reasons, including what just happened with House member Eleanor Holmes Norton, who's 88 years old.
I think legacy matters. I mean, when I was looking into this piece, people were like, "Oh, she used to be a dynamo." And it's like, legacy matters, but I think that we need to really be of the mindset, especially right now, but in general, of what have you done for me lately in regards to the people that are supposed to represent us. And if this is what's happening, you gotta scoot out, like get out. Scoot out.
Yeah.
Who am I?
But it's also, and I understand that she's done a ton. She's done so many different things.
Yeah.
And again, the most gracious thing, there is a famous Roman named Cincinnatus. We have named cities about him, okay? The term dictator comes from ancient Rome, and I'm going to harp on this a little bit. It comes from ancient Rome, and it was the idea of when we were in an extreme crisis that the Senate and the consul power, all this different stuff would be vested in one man, a temporary king, who would handle the crisis and then leave power. And the first person to do that was famously called Cincinnatus. He was a soldier, farmer, consul. They came out. He was plowing the field. They said, "We need you." He released his hands from the plow. He went, dealt with all the issues, said the issue's done, immediately gave up power and went back to the exact place he was plowing. That nickname was then given to George Washington because George Washington did 2 terms as president and said, "I'm done. I don't need to do this anymore." And there was a very, very long time in this country where giving up power was considered the greatest thing you can do. And right now, especially on the Dem side, and God knows from this president on the Republican side, giving up power seems to be the number one thing that is their greatest fear. They are so afraid of relinquishing it to a future generation or to anyone else with a different idea or a different perspective.
But that, my friends, is where today's video is going to end. But you've got more just to click away. You can watch a new full episode of Crashing Out that just went out right here. Or you've got the newest Philip DeFranco show that you haven't seen yet right here. And I've got links to both and even more in the description if you want to get filled in on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. But hey, whatever you do, thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.